Hi, Mike from Heartland Pergolas demonstrating how to install our column over top of our aluminum post mount. Now this step is for customers that chose the 7-inch square or round column option or the 10-inch round column option. If your pergola kit has 5x5s, use your browser's back button and find the appropriate video. The first step in this process is to determine the height that we want the top of our pergola beam to be at. To do that, if you own a laser level, it's really helpful for this step. If you don't, the way I like to do it is to remove one of the aluminum inserts from our 2x6 or 2x8 beam and use that to make a mark on each of my pergola posts. So it's also helpful to have a helper for this step. So you get your beam up there in place, my level. I'm going to get that exactly where I want it. Now this beam height I'm setting for the pergola. It's not going to be any different when we're all done. This is the exact beam height I want for the finished pergola. Go ahead and I clamp the beam in place, take my pencil and I make a mark at the top of that beam. Even if my patio has a little bit of slope, I definitely want my pergola roof to be level. So I'm going to transfer this level mark and use my level all the way around, however many pergola posts we have, and make a mark at level on each one of my posts. Once I do that, I can get rid of this aluminum beam. And I'm going to want to measure from the ground to the mark that I just made. Okay? Now, in this case, it's 29.5 inches. I'm going to check that for every post of the pergola because they may be a little bit different depending upon the slope of the ground. So this is column, we'll call it column A. I'm going to write down 29.5 inches on my installation instructions because we'll need that measurement later. So once I have my top of beam marked, I'm going to use my tape measure and measure down 1 inch from that mark. Transfer that mark 1 inch below all the way around my post mount with a speed square. From there I can go ahead and cut my mount. I like to use a battery saw. It's a non-ferrous blade, 42 teeth, and it goes right through that aluminum. In the interest of time, we'll cut the mount another time. Here it is back, all cut. The next step in the process is to determine the height at which to cut my column sleeve. Now to do that, we need to know a couple things. Number one, what size is our pergola beam? We have two different types. For pergolas 18 feet and below, we use a 2x6 beam that measures exactly 6 inches tall. For pergolas 20 foot and above, we have a 2x8 beam that measures exactly 8 inches. So the height at which we cut our column tube is going to depend upon our beam height and the top and bottom of the column. Now remember I told you to write down 29.5 inches. Here's where that measurement comes back. I measured from the ground to the top of my mount 29.5 inches. I'm going to subtract two things. One, the beam height, in this case 6 inches, and two, the heights of the column base and the column capital. Those are worth 2 inches. So I want to cut my column sleeve 6 inches plus 2 inches, 8 inches shorter than the ground to the top of the beam measurement that I listed earlier. So 29.5 inches minus 8 inches is 21.5 inches. Now, if you happen to have a pergola that's the 20-foot size or greater, you're going to have a little bit of a different post. Our monster post has a slightly different measurement when you go to cut the column sleeve. So if you have a monster post, and say we had that same 29.5 inches, we're going to subtract 8 inches for our beam, and we're only going to subtract 1.5 inches for our columns. The 1.5 inches is because this sleeve sits down a little bit lower on the base of our monster post. So in this case, 29.5 inches minus 8 inches minus 1.5 inches for our column base and capital, we would cut this sleeve right at 20 inches. Okay? So in the case though here, we're not using a monster post, We're using our standard. We subtract 8 inches from 29.5, and we have 21.5 inches. So the fun part is we cut our sleeve at that measurement, 21.5 inches, mark it with a speed square. We transfer that mark on all 4 sides of our column. We get back to our battery saw, and we make that cut all the way around the column. Now, a lot of times people get nervous. It's really hard for those cuts to line up on a square column. It is. Even the best carpenters will have a little bit of overlap. That's okay, because the column, base, and capitals will cover up that cut, so it can be misaligned. So let's just pretend here we just cut that column. We got it here cut to length. The next steps go together pretty quick. You'll take your column base, you'll slide that over your mount. Now the column mount, at the very top, there's a wood plug. This plug you'll drop in, and that plug is there for fastener retention. Now, if you are using our monster post again, it doesn't have one of those plugs. The walls, the aluminum walls on the post are thick enough to hold the fasteners just fine. So that wood's there for the beam fasteners to hold into. You've got your base over top of the column, your sleeve over top. Your column top fits on that. Voila, we're all done. The next step, you're going to set the beams. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, check us out on heartlandpergolas.com to download the written installation instructions. Thanks.